This is APM.
Roll.
.34 Monday morning here on KSJE. You're listening to the Scott Michlin morning program. Next up, my interview with Congressman Ray Lujan from New Mexico's 3rd District. We were speaking Friday morning. That was before the House voted to approve the $2 trillion COVID-19 stimulus bill and before the president was signing it. But other than that, our interview is pretty relevant as to what's included in this bill to help states like New Mexico, Native American tribes, and much, much more. Joining me now from his office in the U.S. Capitol, Congressman Ray Lujan is here from Washington, D.C. Congressman, thank you for joining me this morning.
Good to be with you, Scott.
We are speaking Friday morning, and so you were just telling me that the vote in the House on this massive $2 trillion stimulus bill is not yet happening yet. There's still some debate on the floor, and perhaps that is expected, though, the vote to happen later on today. Is that correct?
That's right. So the debate is taking place upstairs as we speak. Once that debate concludes and we run out of time there, Scott, for debate, what we're anticipating, and it's the reason why so many of us flew back to Washington, D.C., drove back to Washington, D.C. I myself came on a plane from Albuquerque to Phoenix and then caught the red eye and arrived this morning at 6:30. So left Albuquerque at 7 last night, arrived D.C. at 6:30 this morning. And I was also part of that debate on the House floor earlier today. Once we hear if Mr. Massey is going to play those procedural games, and it's being widely reported in publications across the country that he does intend to use some of those procedural gimmicks, then you will see Democrats and Republicans come together to pass this bipartisan package for the good of the country and for the good of brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors all across New Mexico.
Got you. But you are fairly confident that this is going to happen at some point today, being Friday, and by Monday, when we're seeing this on KSJE, this will be the law of the land. The president will have signed it by Monday?
I feel confident in saying that by Monday this will be passed. The question is, are we able to do this today, or will the procedural gimmicks that our Republican colleague from Kentucky is using require the vote to get kicked over to tomorrow? So we'll find out in the next hour or so exactly what's going to take place. But I feel confident that this package, which passed the United States Senate 96-0, will pass the U.S. House in the next day or two.
All right. And you mentioned that vote in the Senate, Congressman. We haven't seen too many 96-0 votes in the Senate for a while.
That's correct. I was really proud to see that Democrats and Republicans could come together in the Senate. Well, we weren't very happy with the way that the package was originally authored, a $1 trillion package that was targeting support to corporations, really light on helping working families across New Mexico and across America. Because of the insistence and work of House Democrats and Senate Democrats, we were able to push that package forward to the point now where there are direct payments that will help families. There is a robust unemployment insurance up to 13 weeks, $600 additional per week that will make a difference, and more support to states, local communities, schools, those that are bearing the brunt and the burden of the cost of the coronavirus right now and the response, and then also to hospitals. And so there are many other provisions. We were proud to also get in the package something that was not initially included, which was direct support for our tribes across the country. So the Navajo Nation, the Pueblos, the two Apache nations in New Mexico will benefit from that, as well as more support to Indian Health Services and research. But tribes across the country and in New Mexico can also qualify for the State Stabilization Fund, which will help county governments, city governments, townships, as well as the state of New Mexico.
And let me pick up on that just a moment, Congressman, because that is part of that help for the Indian Health Service in one part, and then another $8 billion or so for the relief fund, correct? So it's two different ways that included in this bill?
That's correct, and I would suggest, Scott, that there's a third, which is the stabilization fund, the larger fund that goes to states. Tribes do qualify for that as well. So those are three specific areas where the Navajo Nation, the Hickory Apache, Mescalero Apache, and the Pueblos of New Mexico will qualify for those programs.
Understood. Very good. And you mentioned some of the hospitals, too. I know there's some provisions for, we hear a lot about PPE, that personal protective equipment, and some of that gear. That's part of this bill as well, correct?
That is absolutely correct. So what we have seen, especially in New York, out in Washington State and California, but now spreading to Michigan and other states as well, New Mexico, our governor's been doing a great job making some tough decisions along the way. But while we're not seeing the rapid rates that we're seeing in other states, we see hospital bed shortages across the country. And that's one of the reasons why this funding is so important. And it's also one of the reasons why our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, has been clear in requesting for support from the Trump administration as well as the military in helping to set up some of the pop-up hospitals. I just got word, Scott, as well, that my nephew is being deployed to one of those facilities in one of the states across the country. And so we're going to see more and more response, more and more need, especially in the area of providing support to our hospitals, to our first responders, and to our healthcare providers.
I understand. And this being Friday morning, Congressman, we just heard from the state that public schools in New Mexico will remain closed through the end of the school year, again, as an effort to try to keep the spread of this. Do you think that will be happening nationwide? Will we see a nationwide lockdown anytime soon?
Well, New Mexico's not the first state to make that announcement. And so we're continuing to see states that have put shelters in place across the country, have closed their school districts for the rest of the school year as well. And I think it just goes to show the severity of what this is, of what the coronavirus is. And the best way to stop this is to stop the spread of it as well. It's going to take some time to develop the vaccines and the treatments associated with the coronavirus. So it's going to be critically important that we see what's worked and not worked in other parts of the world. What we saw in Italy was there was a rapid spread there. They didn't start practicing social distancing immediately. In South Korea, for example, they immediately embraced social distancing, and we've seen how they've slowed the spread there as well. So across New Mexico, across the country, we need to adhere to those recommendations, follow those best practices. As they say, wash your hands, wash them for 20 seconds. If you don't have access to washing your hands, use hand cleaner as well, sanitizing cleaner. But just make sure that you're following that protocol and don't gather in large crowds. This is critically important that we adhere to that so we can do everything we can to stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Indeed. And Congressman, do you have any concerns about your health there, having to go to Washington and appear in person for this vote and not have it be a voice vote?
Well, you know, I'm fortunately healthy. I feel healthy as well, no symptoms at all. But I think that it was absolutely disgraceful that our Republican colleague from Kentucky, that Mr. Massey, who has been criticized by both Republicans and Democrats, why he chose to play these procedural games. There are many of our colleagues who are older, some that have been weak or have other chronic diseases, have been diagnosed with cancer or other illnesses that were forced to travel because of what Mr. Massey is doing. So I thought it was important for me to be able to find a way to get here as soon as I could when I found out that he was going to be playing these games, and got here as soon as I could, so that way maybe a few of our other colleagues who are still quarantined or actually have been diagnosed with the coronavirus understand that they might not be able to make it here. And it was important that we be here in large numbers to pass this bill so that it's not delayed from getting implemented.
Understood. Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, let me ask you a bit about that big bill, of course, $2 trillion. Now, there are some things in that bill that maybe aren't necessarily directly related to coronavirus and COVID-19. Does that worry you at all or just embarrass you a little bit about having stuff like that put into this bill that really don't relate to the emergency at hand?
Well, you know, one of the areas that has been getting a lot of attention is the Kennedy Center, which is a performing arts facility in Washington, D.C. What's not been said, though, is that it was actually in the Senate bill before these negotiations began as well, Scott. So look, there needs to be support and efforts to make sure that we're delivering all that we can to the working families across New Mexico and across the country. That's where my attention was, and I'm hopeful that going forward, that's where more attention will continue to be.
Understood. And I suppose if folks are familiar with how things get done in the nation's capital and in Congress, this happens with most pieces of legislation, does it not, that other things get put in there that aren't really part of what the legislation is geared towards?
Well, sometimes that occurs, Scott. There's a provision, for example, that some folks have asked me about, which is there's a provision that provides accelerated approval for sunscreen. And it's for a company out of Kentucky. Well, Mitch McConnell represents Kentucky, and L'Oreal is headquartered out in Kentucky, and this is something that he's been trying to get done for some time. So, I think it's a fair concern and criticism that people have across the country as well. But what I'm happy to say today is that I believe that there will be a strong bipartisan vote out of the U.S. House in the same way that we saw that 96-0 vote out of the U.S. Senate to pass this package. And as we pass this package, we're already starting our work to see what would be in package 4, because this is not going away anytime soon, sadly, and we're going to need to continue to make investments all across the country while we prioritize small businesses and everyday folks like the family that I was raised by.
And that was going to be my next question to you, Congressman, is will we see another stimulus package coming out of the White House or Congress anytime soon? And what about the issue this causes for our budget deficits?
Look, Scott, I believe that there will be another package, and this is at a time when the country needs to come together, when there's a natural disaster, when there's a crisis. This is a time for us to make sure we move forward. Now, I do remain concerned associated with what's happened with deficits as well. You know, the $1.2 trillion package that turned into almost a $1.9 trillion package that the American people dubbed a tax scam that was one of President Trump's priorities was not paid for as well, and our Republican colleagues didn't want to pay for that package. I'm a supporter of a simple fiscal policy in the House called PAYGO. That's the same package that brought us those projected surpluses under President Clinton that were passed on to George W. Bush, about a $5 trillion projected surplus, and the closest that we were to balanced budgets as well. So I'm an advocate for those programs, but in time of crisis like we're seeing today, we need to come together and make sure we're making investments to provide support to the American people.
Very good. Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, I know we are short on time, but I appreciate you speaking with me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks for keeping the community informed. This is critically important, and let's all come together. We can work together and we can beat this together, but it's going to take some time, and it's going to take us being more patient, being more kind, being more supportive with one another. So if there's friends or neighbors that you have, especially elderly neighbors that need some help, maybe offer to go get the groceries for them so they don't have to go and be around large crowds in the grocery store and deliver them for them. But keep an eye on all of our loved ones, make sure that they're safe, and look forward to seeing you in person here in the near future, Scott.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for that great advice, and stay well. Thank you very much, Congressman. That's Congressman Ben Ray Lujan from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., speaking with me today on KSJE.